Andre the Giant was billed as a 7'4", 500-pound behemoth. He may not have been bulging with muscles, but unlike most people who are over 7 feet in those pre-Shaq days, he wasn't a skinny long stick but had massive shoulders and a broad back. Even his enormous Neanderthal-like head added to his mystique. He was Andre the Giant, and he was the eighth wonder of the world. He was an indomitable force that had never been pinned down, pre-Hulk Hogan, or forced to submit in 15 years at the WWF. I loved the man back then, before I knew wrestling was totally fake. But my bromance with the man has nothing to do with the actual man, because the actual man was a fatty who was not quite tall enough. Most people believe his actual height to have been around 6'8", and certainly not athletic enough to be even the token white center on an NBA team. I mean, Luke Longley was more of a giant than him. Andre the Giant, just like all things in professional wrestling, was a fabrication, and while I still liked the big guy, the awe with which I used to regard him faded as soon as I understood that he wasn't the giant that I had perceived him to be through 12-year-old eyes. It was all smoke and mirrors. And that's how I feel about Bloody Good Time. The game is developed by Outerlight, the currently defunct game developer that released The Ship in 2002. Bloody Good Time's basic gameplay remains unchanged from The Ship. It's a first-person multiplayer shooter whose main game mode involves every player being randomly assigned to hunt down and kill another player. If you are assigned to kill player X, then the game will show you a picture of player X and reveal player X's name and his general whereabouts. At the same time, another player will be assigned to kill you, so you have to avoid being killed by him, but you're not told by the game the identity of that player. Unlike most multiplayer shooters, your kill-death ratio doesn't really matter. How well you do in this game mode depends entirely on a scoring system that's primarily based on which weapons you use to secure kills. The game randomly assigns points to each of the 16 weapons, ranging from 2 points to 5 points. So if you kill your target with a frying pan, and the frying pan is valued at 4 points, you will receive 4 points. Being killed by the player assigned to hunt and kill you will result in a small score drop. Conversely, killing your hunter will result in a small score bump. Killing a player that you're not assigned to hunt and kill will result in you losing some points. Conversely, being killed by someone who's not assigned to hunt and kill you will not result in any point loss. In addition, there's a security system, such as security cameras and guards, in place whose main purpose is to deter you from using your weapons. Weapons always spawn in specifically designed areas. For example, in one map, the shotgun always spawns in one of the bathroom stalls. In another, the shotgun always spawns in the cellar. You can carry up to 4 weapons at a time, and you can tuck away all the weapons so you're not visibly carrying any of them. If you're spotted carrying or using a weapon by the security system, guards will give chase in an attempt to catch you and tase the hell out of you. If you are caught, you're penalized by losing a weapon and or losing some points. You're also briefly vulnerable and defenseless when tased, meaning that other players could kill you in those instances. You can also kill players by triggering preset traps, and by preset I mean that the map already has these traps set in place, and all you need to do to trigger them is press the buttons that correspond to the traps. One example of a trap is a room that's rigged to send electric bolts throughout the room, which would instantly kill anyone in the room. And you can also kill players with your own murderous hands, such as strangling them to death if they happen to be sleeping at the time, or flushing them down the toilet if they happen to be using the toilet. Bloody Good Time also has a needs system. You must sleep, eat, and poop. Insert masturbate, and that's life as I know it. Sleep deprivation will result in your character moving slower, hunger will result in your attacks becoming less potent, and constipation will lead to your hit points being reduced. Sleeping, eating, and pooping take time, and during that time you're completely vulnerable to attacks. You can also get bonus points by mocking your target, and thus making your intentions to kill clear, and then scoring a successful kill. You also get bonus points by taunting the killed target. You can also pickpocket another player to get bonus points and steal a weapon they're carrying. Sleeping, eating, pooping, mocking, and taunting leave you vulnerable to and defenseless against attacks and pickpockets, so you have to sneak in these activities at opportune times. One of those opportune times is at the beginning of a round. A typical match is divided into a dozen rounds, with each round lasting several minutes. At the beginning of a round, you're given 30 seconds or so to prepare. You can use that free time to secure a specific weapon, find a sofa or bed to sleep in, find some food to eat, find a toilet to poop in, or whatever else you care to do. A player killing another during setup time will suffer points loss, so you're somewhat protected against attacks when engaged in these activities during the setup time, though you're still vulnerable to pickpockets. In typical servers, 3 rounds of this hunt and be hunted game modes will be followed by so-called bonus rounds, and the game offers 4 bonus rounds modes, such as the Scene Stealer mode, in which an Oscar-like statue spawns in a random location and your objective is to find the statue and hold onto it as long as possible, with the location of the statue and the identity of the statue holder being revealed to everyone else. The longer you hold the statue, the more points you score. 2 other game modes that are worth mentioning are Infected and Hunt the Leader. Infected is a game mode in which half the players become zombies. The objective of those infected is to find someone who's not infected and pass on the infection, and become uninfected as a result. The objective of those uninfected is to remain so. The longer you remain uninfected, the more points you score. Hunt the Leader is pretty self-explanatory. Whoever is leading in points is the target. You get points for killing the leader, determined by what weapon you use to kill the leader. You lose points for killing a non-leader, unless you're the leader. The leader gets points for killing anyone. Throw into everything I described thus far, nice, crisp, cartoony graphics powered by the Source engine, a zany director is shooting a horror movie and you're one of the 16 cast members tasked to perform actual murders concept, 8 distinct, humorously stereotyped and wonderfully rendered characters, like the surfer, the beach babe, the goth, the clown, the stoner, wacky weapons, intriguing secondary murder aids, like a glue gun that will immobilize the player you successfully hit, or pills that give you health or speed boosts, or a cosmetic kit that will shoot up powder when dropped and temporarily blind those nearby, or a disc-like device that will project a hologram in your likeness, a la Princess Leia pining for Obi-Wan, or accessible closets that will allow you to disguise as another player temporarily, and well-designed and themed maps, and the game sounds like a romp. It sounds like you could have a bloody good time playing the game. But bloody good time is like Andre the Giant. Things are not as they appear. This is not a 7'4", 500-pound beast. It's a 6'8", 350-pound fatty, whose only feature that's especially gigantic is an oversized beach ball of a head. I took up a lot of time describing the game, which is very atypical of me, but it was necessary because the game sounds so awesome and full of potential when listening to a description of the game. And it sounds so damn unique, except when compared to the ship. And that's why the game suffers. Compared to the ship, Bloody Good Time, which is described as its spiritual successor, is a step backwards for the developers. It's a much faster paced and streamlined version of a ship, and it loses a lot of what makes the ship so interesting. I won't delve too deeply into this, but there is a tactical and methodical process to playing the ship, as the identity of your target is somewhat shrouded in the game. It was a bit like playing the board game Clue in that you're forced to approach other players and converse with them to find out which of them is your target. But there is an uneasy dichotomy at play because talking to them may reveal your identity to your hunter. Once you found out who your target is, it was a game in which you stalked and tried hard to conceal the fact that the player you were stalking is your target until an opportune time arose in which you could successfully pull off a hit. I find Bloody Good Time to be too chaotic and hectic for this type of hunt and be hunted game. A lot of the anxiety and paranoia that were prevalent when playing the ship is missing in Bloody Good Time. And perhaps it's fair to say that Bloody Good Time is a very different game from the ship, despite them sharing a basic hunt and be hunted game mode, and that Bloody Good Time is more about the action than building up the paranoia, but Bloody Good Time also kind of fails in providing good action. The guns do have a satisfying pop to them. The melee weapons are kind of interesting and somewhat varied, though it's basically a matter of swinging away for each melee weapon. And there are some unusual weapons like the remote-controlled and detonated rat bomb, but the deathmatch experience is quite hollow. It lacks depth. The murder aids I mentioned earlier do provide some tactical depth. Some items are useful for certain game modes, like the speed boost pill comes especially handy in the Scene Stealer mode because you can run away from everyone when using the pill. Or like the hologram projector is particularly useful in the hunt or be hunted game modes because you can set up in the middle of the field and hide somewhere nearby to reveal the identity of the one that's tasked to hunt and kill you, as anyone who shoots at the hologram is most likely to be your hunter. And you can use security guards somewhat tactically to protect yourself against your hunter, as the guards will attempt to tase him and temporarily incapacitate him if they see him whipping out a weapon, which affords you the opportunity to kill your hunter and earn some bonus points. But the murder aids and security guards don't add that much depth to the game. Even choosing when to sleep or eat or poop boils down to finding yourself relatively alone and hoping that no one runs into you while you're incapacitated. Finding your target is very easy once you familiarize yourself with the maps, and there are only 3 maps in the game. And thereafter, the game devolves into a pretty standard fair one-on-one duel, like a shitty Counter-Strike clone. Either you whip out your weapon and successfully hit and kill your target, or the target sees you whipping out your weapon and fights back and kills you, and repeat the process. But the biggest problem with the game is that there isn't a good incentive to stop players from breaking the rules. Because the game is pretty fast paced, there's really no room to pause and think. It seems that half the players in any given server are trying to play the game properly, and the other half are just going around and shooting everything in sight. The game will let you know that you killed a non-target and will notify you of the points you lost as a result, but that still doesn't seem to deter people from continuing to kill everyone around them. If you kill 6 non-targets, the game forces you to spectate the next round, but then people simply switch to other servers and other ignorant players take their place and continue the unwanted mayhem. And despite the game providing clear enough basic instructions on how to play the game, it seems a lot of people are confused about the exact rules. It seems to me that people just don't take the time in-game or otherwise to find out how to play the game, because they're so used to playing deathmatches. It's a bit unfair to blame the game for their ignorance, but it's not like first-time players of a ship went around killing everyone in sight. Just by the game's atmosphere and the measured pace of the game, first-time players were able to sense that the ship is not just another deathmatch-focused multiplayer shooter. They took the time to find out the objective and how to go about achieving the objective. But in bloody good time, it's confusion and chaos. Something as simple as making available 16 different characters instead of the 8 would have made things a lot more intuitive. The game puts a cap of 16 players per server, so it would have made sense and made the hunt and be hunted modes easier to understand if there were 16 different characters, with each character only being selectable once. That way, a player would see his target's portrait on the upper right corner of his screen, and also see the target running about before him, and be able to connect the dots and understand that he's supposed to kill only that one specific target. But because a given server will most likely have multiple players choosing the same characters, things are not as intuitive. Just something as simple as that would have done wonders, I think. Perhaps his propensity to kill everyone will change as more people familiarize themselves with the game, but naturally there will always be fuckos who think killing non-targets is absolutely hilarious and live to piss off people who are trying to take the game seriously. In the end, the reason for all the overall confusion and chaos doesn't really matter. It matters only that it's frustrating as hell when you get killed by a non-hunter just as you're about to take out your target. I feel like the game needs a more effective penalty system, or needs to reward innocent victims so that getting killed by these morons isn't so frustrating. And the game is a bit soulless. What I mean is that the art style and zany weapons and murder aids, and the comically stereotyped characters suggest that this game is full of quirks and humor, but it's surprisingly lacking. A while back, before the game's release, knowing my hard-on for Team Fortress 2, someone suggested this game to me as a potential future review, and though I could tell from what I saw then that the game isn't going to be anywhere near as good as TF2, I still thought the game would at least feature some interesting quirks and laugh-out-loud humor, but even my subdued expectations weren't met. The characters' taunting, antics, and death animations aren't particularly funny. Even something like killing someone by flushing him down the toilet sounds funnier than it actually is in the game. Everything's actually kind of painfully unfunny, as if the developers tried too hard to inject the game with a sense of humor. And my biggest problem with the game's attempt at humor is that they made the characters sound like The Sims. Instead of having them talk and speak intelligible words, they have its characters mumble or hum a tune or squeak. In fact, there's really nothing that sets all the characters apart. The differences between them are mainly cosmetic. If you didn't know by their physical appearance and their names, like the surfer or the stoner, it would be impossible to distinguish them. It's not like in TF2 where each character has very distinct mannerisms and taunts and personalities. For a game that's seemingly rife with character, Bloody Good Time is surprisingly bland. Certainly, it's a game that has some interesting things going for it. The long description I gave of a game screams uniqueness and personality and hints at some tactical depth. It sounds like a bloody good game. But for all its apparent grandeur, the game boils down to a shitty Counter-Strike clone with a smidgen of tactical depth and a pretense at TF2 wackiness and humor. The game is all smoke and mirrors, just like Andre the Giant.